Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense on YouTube. Today we're going to talk about an uncomfortable subject. That nasty feeling you get in the pit of your stomach when you realize you don't have enough money to pay your bills. Let's head on down to the beach and talk about that. So, in my early 20s, one of the first mistakes I ever made was to get a credit card because a lot of times people in their 20s don't have the discipline necessary to manage their credit. And I certainly didn't. And I ran up big bills. And over the course of the next 6, 7 years, I wound up paying off those bills, sometimes month by month. Sometimes I would get a tax refund and use it to knock off an entire debt. But the bottom line was I really was not very careful on my finances. And as you've probably seen, there are a lot of banks right now that are having trouble. Silicon Valley Bank failed. Signature Bank failed. A lot of the regional banks have lost large amounts of money in their stock portfolio, I should say. Their stock has dropped. One bank, I believe Credit Suisse, has dropped by 25%. That is a huge, it's a huge loss for those banks. Now, there's a good chance everything will wind up working out in the end, but there is one thing you need to understand about bankers. They take the approach that you should never let a crisis go to waste. And that is true in the context of the banks having some failures. There'll be banks that are in better financial condition that gobble up the ones that are not in better financial condition. And that, again, that predatory act is something that's very consistent with many banks. But when the economy goes south, as it has in the last 2 years, and people are out of work or inflation deprives them of the spending power of the money that they have, well, the crutch that some people use to get by in that situation is their credit cards. And the credit cards are not a good way to deal with not having enough money because all they do is make it likely that you will have even less in the future. Now, here's the important thing to understand about banks. Banks are going to get their money, and normally the first step that they employ is to cut off your ability to spend on the card, and then they will coerce you into paying. They may also increase your interest rate on the credit card. And now instead of paying 15, 18, 19% interest on your credit cards, you're paying 24 and 25%, which is, I think, an egregious amount of interest to pay. Some states have usury laws that prohibit banks from charging that big of a interest rate, but many states do not. In fact, when John Ashcroft was the governor of Missouri, he worked with the legislature to repeal the usury law because he said that artificially restricted the kinds of lending that lenders could do. And I don't think it worked out really well for most citizens of Missouri, but that's what he did. So it's important to understand that the government doesn't necessarily act as your friend in a situation where you fall behind on making payments. They can act as your friend in one respect, but in most cases they don't. So let's talk a little bit about credit and what to do and what not to do. If you have an emergency, for example, your mother or father in a distant state suffers a fall and you need to fly out and go see them, that's the time to use a credit card. The time to use a credit card is not when you only have 10 bucks in your pocket between now and payday and you want to go to Starbucks and get a cup of coffee. The time to use a credit card is principally for emergencies. You use it for convenience and not as a secondary amount of income that you have available to spend. Most people already know this, but I'm saying this for the benefit of the people who may need help and may need to understand exactly what kind of trouble they can get themselves into. So if the credit card company can't work with you and get you to pay your bills by cutting off your credit and uh, harassing you over the phone to pay, then the next step is to hire a collection agency. There are two different kinds of collection agencies. One is the collection agency that merely sends out notices and updates the credit reporting agencies on your inability to pay, and uses frequent phone calls and requests and other types of what I would call coercion to get you to pay the debt. The other kind of credit and collection agency is the kind of collection agency that starts with phone calls, but if they don't get some response in the first 30, 60, 90 days, the next thing they do is they march down to the courthouse in your town and they file a collection lawsuit. And you may not even know this has happened until you get a knock on the door and a sheriff hands you a piece of paper that says, "Congratulations, you are being sued." And the lawsuit will say something to the effect of, you had an account with Acme Bank, Acme granted you credit, you signed the credit agreement that is attached on the back of as Exhibit 1 to the petition, and you have run up a bill of $5,000 and you haven't made any payments in the last 90 days, and it looks like you're not going to make any payments. So the bank has accelerated the debt, and now instead of taking monthly payments, it wants its $5,000 right now. Thank you. Before noon would be even better. And of course, when that happens, you're looking at that and you're going, well, if I don't have, $90 to pay the payment that I have to pay, what in the world makes this bank think I have $5,000 sitting around in the cookie jar to pay all of this all at once? The bank doesn't care. Neither does the attorney who sued you. All they care about is going into court and getting a judgment against you. Now, that judgment is going to stay on your credit for at least until it gets resolved, and at least until it gets paid. And then after that, it will probably stay on your credit report for 7 years, because judgments do go on credit reports. And if somebody has suffered a judgment against them, well, that is a black mark. It means you're probably not going to be able to buy a house from a commercial lender. You're probably not going to be able to get another credit card for many years. And in addition to all of that, it just is a black mark that may affect your ability to get car insurance. It may affect your ability to rent a place to live. It has a lot of impacts that you never think about at the time you're looking at that summons. So what is the one thing that people do when they get these? The thing that they do is they shove it into the desk drawer so that their wife or their husband won't see it. Because everybody knows that if you have a problem and you just ignore it, it will go away. Except banks and lawyers do not go away. And when they don't go away, what happens is, buried in the information that you'll receive from the court when you get that summons, is it says you need to file an answer within X days. In federal court, it would be within 20 days. In state court in Missouri, it's within 30 days. You can get additional time to file an answer if you ask for it. But generally speaking, you have to file something with the court to let them know that you contest the amount of money that you're being sued for. And this is how doing nothing hurts you. Because if you do not contest the amount that you owe, even if you believe you owe it, then they get a default judgment for that amount, and that judgment goes on your credit. And not only that, it gives the creditor the right to seize your personal property and garnish your wages, as we'll talk about here in just a moment. Now, what normally happens, as I said before, is people shove it in a desk drawer and don't worry about it and continue spending like drunken sailors. And then one day the sheriff comes up and knocks on the door and hands you a notice that says that they are going to take your car, because your car is your personal property. And even though another bank owns a portion of your car that you're making car payments on, that portion that you own is going to be sold. Your bank is going to get paid off. The bank that financed the car will be paid off. And whatever is left over is going to go to satisfy your judgment. Or you'll go into work and the boss will be standing there waving a piece of paper, angry at you, saying, "How in the world did you manage to get your wages garnished?" A lot of employers will not allow you to continue working if you get your wages garnished more than once. And a lot of times what happens is garnishments tend to expire at a certain point in time, and then they have to be renewed. Well, this increases the administrative workload in the office where you're being paid, and as a result of that, it really irritates the people who run businesses. So again, what happens? You wind up losing your job, and now you not only do not have a way to pay the judgment, you don't have a way to make your way in the world. So the idea that you can just let this go and ignore it should be wiped from your mind immediately. If you have been sued on a credit card or other debt that you are owing to a bank, do not stop or pass go until you contact a lawyer. Now, a lawyer is not going to be able to wave a magic wand and get you out of the debt. Although, in several instances, I have waved a magic wand and gotten somebody out of a debt. But usually that was because some other person was primarily responsible for the debt. The bottom line is that a lawyer can help you deal with this in a way that makes some sense. Now, here is another thing that neither banks nor collection agencies are going to tell you, and that is the bank realizes that they made a mistake when they issued you a credit card. And they know that there are a lot of other people out there who would like to have credit cards, and they can't have more than a certain amount of defaults on their books in order to meet banking regulations. So what they want is they want their money back. But they are not necessarily obligated to take back all of that money. So if you have the way to scrape together, maybe from friends, relatives, another bank, if you can get a cash sum, maybe not even the full amount. I've seen banks take $4,000 on a $6,000 debt before. You can probably settle it for less than the amount of the debt. But again, you're going to need a lawyer to negotiate this for you, because the bank is not going to give you the time of day. They just aren't. That's the way banks are. And I want to caution you here. This is another little thing you may not recognize, but let's suppose that you go to the bank and you are able to negotiate a deal where they write off $2,000 or $2,500 of your debt. You pay the debt, you walk away thinking, whew, boy, dodged a bullet. And then at the end of the year, you get issued a 1099 that says they forgave $2,500 in debt. And oh, by the way, the Internal Revenue Service classifies that as income. A forgiven debt is income to you because it decreases your liabilities and it increases the amount of money you have to spend. Even though you might be able to negotiate a deal where you can pay less, at the end of the day, you're going to take something of a hit through the tax system for that. In the event that you are like some people who use their MasterCard to pay their Visa, and you find yourself one day looking at owing $30,000 to American Express, $30,000 to Capital One Bank, and $20,000 to Bank of America on credit cards, and you make $20,000 a year, you recognize that this is an untenable situation. You can't make even the minimum payments on any of these and still have enough money to put food on your table and a place to live. You are in a situation where you unfortunately have to take bankruptcy. bankruptcy has become a much more involved process in the last 10 years. Because of that, you're going to need to see a bankruptcy lawyer sooner rather than later. And here's why it's necessary to see that lawyer sooner rather than later. Because when you see a bankruptcy lawyer and you qualify to file a bankruptcy, in most cases you have to go through credit counseling, and if credit counseling can't resolve the problem, then you file what's called either a Chapter 7 or a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. And once that bankruptcy petition is filed, something absolutely marvelous happens. The automatic stay goes into effect. And what that does is it stops any lawsuit that has been filed. It prevents the filing of any additional lawsuits. And it says to the creditors, hey, if you have a claim against our guy here, you need to bring it to us here in federal court and sign up to be a part of this bankruptcy if you want to get paid. In other words, bankruptcy puts a hold on all those collection actions and you get room to breathe again. In most cases, if you have a job and you're not in danger of losing it, a Chapter 13 bankruptcy is probably what you're going to be steered into. That's called the work plan. All of your debts are consolidated, and then over a period of time, they are all paid off, at a much reduced rate, of course, but they're all paid off. And then at the end of it, you get a discharge from all of those debts. It is something that requires a bankruptcy practitioner, which I am not. You need somebody very familiar with the law of bankruptcy, because the law of bankruptcy is different from the rest of the statutory law in the United States. And you need somebody who is an expert to handle that. But the reason you may want to file bankruptcy sooner rather than later is that once a creditor gets a judgment against you, they become a judgment creditor and they're entitled to the full amount of the debt. I'm not certain how that affects a Chapter 13, but in a Chapter 7, they certainly get the lion's share of whatever amount of money is obtained through liquidating your assets. And by liquidating your assets, I mean selling your house, selling your car. You can sometimes keep one vehicle. There are certain things that the bankruptcy court in certain states can't take. They're called the exemptions. And the exemptions are state by state. But you get to keep the things that are exempted, but everything else is going to be gathered up and sold, probably at auction, and probably for a lot less than it's worth. But the bottom line is, at the end of the day, in either a Chapter 7 or a Chapter 13, you come out not owing anybody anything. And that is the entire purpose of bankruptcy. It is there for people who are honest but unfortunate debtors. And it works. But you definitely want to see somebody sooner rather than later. Now, I don't know enough to be able to explain to you the differences between a Chapter 7 and a Chapter 13, when a Chapter 13 is appropriate and when a Chapter 7 is. I'm not, like I said, an expert on bankruptcy law. And if you have this issue, you need to go see somebody, again, sooner rather than later. Hopefully sooner than somebody sues you for not being able to pay your bills. And if you are not one of those people who uses their MasterCard to pay their Visa, and you just have a couple of credit cards and the debt has become overwhelming, that's when you need to go see a credit counseling service. A credit counseling service can help by negotiating with your creditors, reducing the amount you owe, stopping the interest on that debt, and then usually being able to negotiate an amount of money you can pay every month to satisfy all of those creditors. Many people have escaped the poverty of debtorship by going this route, and it works very, very well. You have to make sure you get an honest credit counseling agency. Obviously, you go through the Better Business Bureau and find one. But at the end of the day, that is a good option. Now, let me tell you about one other thing you need to be aware of. You'll often see signs stuck in the ground near stop signs. You'll see them you'll get direct mail pieces from these people, and they will say, credit repair. We can repair your credit in days. we can get you an A1 credit rating. Take it from me, they can't. What they are doing is they are using a loophole in the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act and the Fair Credit Reporting Act, where if you go to the credit reporting agencies and say, I dispute this debt, they can't report that debt as part of your credit report until it is certified by the bank or credit agency as no longer in dispute, which generally means the bank will send them a copy of what you owe. They may send them a copy of the lawsuit, who knows. But the bottom line is they cannot, at least for long term, repair your credit report. The only thing that can repair your credit report is to pay your bills. And when you pay your bills, you can, in most cases, clean up your credit report quite nicely. But if you don't pay your bills, you're going to be stuck. You're going to be on the hook for the amount of money that you owe. And if you don't take bankruptcy and, for example, you just skip town, they will find you. They will eventually find you. They will serve you. They will sue you. And they'll get a judgment against you. And even though they may have to chase you all the way across the country, eventually, at some point, they'll find you and they will start to get some of their money back. It is absolutely no fun to be in a situation where you are dodging creditors. I've talked to a lot of people who have felt like they were being pursued by the hounds. And as a result, they really, at some point, considered alternatives that can't be spoken of on YouTube. If you have a problem, get help. You have to get your spending under control. And if you can't do that, then again, you need to find somebody who can help you with that problem, whether it's a counselor, whether it's a lawyer, whether it's your pastor, whoever it may be, you need to seek help. Well, again, this is not one of those cheery, happy-go-lucky videos, but by the same token, hopefully it's been helpful. And if you have any questions, you can leave them down below in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, all the stuff we ask you to do. Thank you so much for watching. If you have an opportunity to help somebody today, particularly somebody who might be down on their luck and need that $5 so they can go to lunch, help them out. It'll make your day. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on here next time. If you like this video, here are a few others you might try, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a terrific day, guys.